Hello and good evening. Gabby here from the Addison Public Library with Tom from the CCCS. And today he's going to be talking to us about renters' rights and responsibilities. But first, he is going to give you a quick introduction about what they do at his organization. Go ahead, Tom.
Okay. So hi, guys. Thanks for having me, and thanks, Gabby, for allowing us to talk about renters' rights today. So we've been, I work with Consumer Credit Counseling Services of Northern Illinois, and I'll show you as it says here, our shameless plug is, as Gabby mentioned. We'll show this real quick, and then we'll get on with the topic. So we are located and we're Consumer Credit Counseling Service of Northern Illinois. We're not for profit agency. We've been around since 1982. We provide our services, so we provide counseling services free of charge to most of the clients, most of the people who come in seeking help. We're located in 3 counties, McHenry, Lake, and Kane. We're not geographically bound by those counties, but that's where our physical locations are. We do serve pretty much the entire Northern Illinois area. As you can see on the bottom, we're in Woodstock, Elgin, and Ingleside, which is really, I guess, more of a Fox Lake area. If you're from that area, you probably know. We have one central phone number, which is 338-5757. And beneath there, at least I have something on the screen here that's hiding it, but beneath that phone number is our website. So if you wanted to check us out any further, you're more than welcome to. We have bilingual counselors in all 3 of our offices, and all the counseling sessions that we do right now are pretty much online or by Zoom anyway. So nothing physical is really happening right now during the pandemic, and I expect that to continue for maybe the next couple of months or so. With respect to how counselors are certified, we are HUD certified for the housing side. We primarily work with first-time buyers, foreclosure prevention, reverse mortgages. Right now, up in McHenry County, we're doing a lot of work with eviction, help with eviction assistance or rental assistance to avoid evictions. And that actually goes for, in addition to rents, it's also utility help that we're able to get people access to. We're also affiliates of the National Foundation for Credit Counseling, and they certify our counselors for both debt and credit counseling, basic budgeting, credit repair, debt management programs, pretty much all around other type of debt management and budgeting and credit repair. As I said, it's really more about helping to improve your credit score and maybe helping you to find ways, or helping people to find ways to pay down debt. Finally, we are court approved for bankruptcy counseling and education as well. Keep in mind that that's the only services that we charge for is the bankruptcy counseling. And I think it's largely because it comes through the courts. So, but everything else is funded through the community, and we pass those savings on to our constituents. So, with that, I'll move forward. The counseling services that we provide, again, I've just lifted this off the website, but everything from financial counseling to housing, student loans, which if anybody's ever looked at that, it is just an absolute spaghetti bowl of potential outcomes that you can have from student loans. It's kind of crazy what happens with all that stuff and how it works. Credit reports, we do counseling on credit reports. We also do presentations to talk about what credit reports are and how they work, and credit scores. Debt management, which is a formal program to help people get out of debt. It usually takes about a span of 5 years, and helps them to reduce rates and get payments made on time, and helps improve their credit as well. And then bankruptcy, general counseling for bankruptcy, and helping people navigate through that process as well. So that's really the counseling services, and I like to think of that as kind of working more on the deeper end of the pool, if you will. and then on the literacy side, which I believe is the shallower end of the pool, I like to think of myself as the swim coach on the shallow end of the pool, as opposed to the lifeguards on the deeper end of the pool, if you will. So on my side, I talk about financial literacy. Tonight we're going to talk about renters' rights, which is in the upper left-hand corner, but we also do a number of different programs that and teach people and provide literacy on many different subjects here, as you can see. So feel free, if you see something that kind of jumps out at you, to talk to your librarian in the future and say, hey, maybe we should do something on this too. We're happy to talk about these topics, and also we're doing a couple others that are in the works as well. So anyway, so when we talk about putting together a financial plan, and we talk about any type of plan to start out with, the best way that I can illustrate this pictorially, if you will, is it all starts with the budget at the epicenter. Once you get a budget in place, and budget is really the way to organize your finances, and so you can see there's a lot of different components on the outside here. Between you can see in the italics on the outside. There's a lot of different components that would fit into a financial plan, but at the end of the day, it's the budget. And then you look at your income, your expenses, your savings, and your debt. And those are what I deem to be the major pillars of the budget. And then from there, again, you get all these different components that would feed into one of those major pillars. But at the end of the day, what it really comes down to is that the budget is really at the epicenter of any type of financial plan. The reason for that is because typically, when you start to think about a budget, budgets just don't come out of the woodwork. Typically, what happens is that people say, "Hey, I need to fix my credit score." There's a lot of different. I feel like I need to start saving for retirement, or my income and expenses. I'm out of money every month. I can't figure out why. Okay, well, what's the common theme? What's the common answer? You need a budget. So there's a lot of different catalysts, and there's a lot of different goals, and really what they all lead to is you need to have a budget. There may, these goals may be anything from an emergency savings vehicle, or starting a savings vehicle, or income and expense management may be more of a short-term thing, or just kind of getting the idea behind it and getting into the habit and starting at maybe more of a short-term thing. But retirement savings, for example, may be a little bit longer term. You usually see once you start with a budget, or once you start to put together a budget, what you realize is that the three goals you have may be contingent on maybe 3 or 4 more goals that you'll need in order to get to where you want to be. And some of them are going to be more longer term in nature, and some of them are going to be more shorter term in nature. But once you kind of start to get the ideas in your head as to how you want things to go, you can pretty much put it down on paper and create a plan to get you there. So typically what we find out is that the road to the financial plan is paved by both long and short-term goals. I usually tell people to keep their goals reasonable and achievable within reason, meaning that in some ways you want to have some achievability with your goals to get started, but by the end of it, you want to have some stretch goals too, because I think once you put this stuff down on paper, once you have a plan, it's so much easier to start kind of navigating along that plan, if you will, because you actually see where you're going, as opposed to just kind of trying to fight your way through a forest or something like that. You actually have a plan as to how to get to where you're going. When you start to do that, and when you start to realize that, you start to see some short-term successes, and you start to build on those short-term successes, which then build into your longer-term successes. So again, give yourself some stretch goals. Along the way, I always say, expect the unexpected, and by all means, don't give up. Keep going. It's, if you've gotten this far and you're starting a plan, you're putting together a budget, you're definitely stepping in the right direction. So today, take us back to our big picture, the big picture plan, if you will. And I'm just showing you what we're talking about today is this component out over here, and it's rent. So we're going to talk about renters' rights. First, before we do anything, though, we always have an icebreaker. So we're going to talk about, the question is, and it's a question of the day, and I pull it down from a website that is a very good website, by the way, and it helps helps people who teach financial literacy, gives them lots of material to work through. So certainly a nod to NGPF for the great work they do. What's the average credit score needed to rent an apartment in 2021? The answer is 638. Now, clearly, the number is 638. It depends on where you're at. And let's take a look at that. So you can see here that, San Francisco, Boston, New York, kind of more the upscale places, if you will, your credit score is, needed to be a little bit higher than in. And now I'm not saying anything about Arlington, Texas, or Memphis, or Las Vegas. I have family in Las Vegas, so I'm not saying anything bad about those guys. But it does tend to be a little bit easier to get a credit, to get you don't need such a high credit score to get a place in Vegas as you do to, say, get a place in San Francisco. Now, for us in Chicago, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that it's somewhere between 580, and I can't see the last score on San Diego here, but we'll say somewhere between 580 and 660 is what you would need to have a score in order, and it's an average rent score for the city of Chicago. So, but anyway, it's something to kind of think about as we move forward here. So we're going to talk about renters' rights, and we're going to talk about responsibilities as a tenant. And really at the end of the day, it's important for you to know what your rights are, but then it's also important for you to know what your landlord's rights and responsibilities are too. And it's important to say, again, rights and responsibilities for, all four, of those pieces. So we talk about, at first we'll talk about the Civil Rights Act of 1968. It protects against discrimination in 7 protected characteristics. Those 7 characteristics of people are race, sex, color, familial status, religion, national origin, and disability. So I had to make sure there are 7. And it covers most housing situations, and it basically requires that rental rates are the same for all people based on those 7 traits. So you can't look at somebody and say, I don't like the way you look, I'm doubling the rent. Certainly, and now, like I said, it's in most housing situations, but if you're going into an apartment complex, certainly it applies. But there are certain situations where it may not. And landlords cannot lie about the availability or status of an apartment or a rental because of the person and the way they look, if you will. So I'm going to show a quick video on this. Actually, it's not that quick of a video, but I'm going to show a video on this. Gabby, if for some reason it doesn't go on, let me know. But I'm going to show a quick video on this. It's kind of timely given the it's just Martin Luther King Day.
Few in the nation believe that fair housing would, in our time, become the unchallenged law of this land. And indeed, this bill has had a long and stormy trip.
Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man.
Ladies and gentlemen, Martin Luther King was shot and was killed tonight in Memphis.
The death of the prophet of nonviolence set off the worst outbreak of arson, looting, and criminal activity in the nation's history. Washington's ghettos burned within a few blocks of the nation's capital.
The life of a man who symbolized the freedom and faith of America has been taken. And no words of mine can fill the void of the eloquent voice that has been stilled. But this I do believe deeply. The dream of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. has not died with him.
President Johnson was willing to speak up and say, we have to pass a fair housing bill.
Hello, Mr. President. Yes, Dick. We're in trouble. We need some help. Yes? I'm afraid of that.
Federal troops, for the first time since the Civil War, took up positions to guard government buildings.
Nothing's probably touchier than your own neighborhood and your own home or your own apartment. The administration, which supported the bill, said this has no chance. The other stuff is okay, but this will kill any politician that touches it.
Well, I just could not live beside them. I don't feel that they should be oppressed. But I moved here because it was a white community. I have 2 daughters and 2 sons. And if there's too many colored people around here, I definitely will get out. I think that the property values will immediately go down if they're allowed to move in here in any number.
It seems as though our country is pulling apart into separate societies, where whites have jobs and Negroes have unemployment, where the middle class lives in suburbs and the poor are left in the ghettos, where one group of Americans looks upon another group of Americans with growing mistrust and even dread.
Then the bill went over into the House Rules Committee, and under the chairmanship of the famous Judge Smith, right-wing segregationist from Virginia, he wouldn't hold hearings on it. He would take the bill home so nobody could act on it. And we were running out of time.
Thousands flowed through the rainy streets of Memphis this day, finishing a march that Dr. King planned to lead in support of striking garbage workers.
How many men must die before we can really have a free and true and peaceful society?
Cause you're present, Lord. And I know you'll reach out and take mine. You take our hand.
The death of Martin Luther King is a tragic thing, but no legislation should be passed as a memorial to anyone.
In spite of the riots, I am going to support this legislation with all the vigor that I possess.
The laws that we pass up here are for all time. The Martin Luther Kings come and go.
The public reaction to this horror gave the sensible members of the committee a compelling argument that the House Rules Committee had to report that bill out. And I think that's how we got our bill. They just didn't dare bottle it up any longer.
I have a dream that one day Negroes will be able to buy a house anywhere that their money will carry them.
At long last this afternoon, fair housing for all is now a part of the American way of life. Democracy's work is being done. And the bell of freedom rings out a little loud. We have come some of the way, not near all.
Fight still goes on because we unfortunately have the laws, but we don't have the enforcement. That we have changed, but we still have the same kinds of discrimination.
The U.S. Commission on Civil Rights said today that efforts by federal agencies to end housing discrimination have been generally superficial or incomplete.
President Carter has ordered federal agencies to use all means possible to strengthen fair housing programs. For the first time, people with disabilities and families with children will be protected from housing discrimination.
President Reagan signed legislation today designed to toughen up the nation's fair housing laws.
Why did you take part in this demonstration today? Just because there was a huge crowd, or did you have any personal reason?
Well, I took part in this march today because of Martin Luther King and what he stood for, because this march is what he died for.
You know what he stood for?
Yes. He stood for nonviolence and peace for all men of all kinds. And I think if he died for it, I could carry out what he started.
Okay. So, okay, here we go. So we're back on again. I think it's worth showing that video, one, because it's, you know, it's history, and you know, it just happened a long time ago, and two, you know, it's amazing to me that it took somebody having to die in order to get that law passed, because it really didn't look like, you know, based on what they're showing here, it just really didn't feel like it was going to happen until he died. But it's amazing that somebody had to die in order to get this thing passed. I guess that's just where we are. So on that note, we'll go back and talk about renters today, and rentals, you know, renters' rights today, and kind of what we're talking about now. So potential obstacles when you start thinking about, you know, what could be in the way of, you know, you getting or somebody getting a rental property, or getting a rental place. You know, typically what landlords are looking for is income that is greater than that your rent is less than 30% of your total income. Always looking at whether or not you have unpaid utility bills. They will look at your credit report to see if you have unpaid utility bills, or they can check that. Probably ask to see if you have any savings available as well, just in case. They will, like I said, they will check your credit report, your credit history. If you have any bad rental histories, or if you have a bad banking history, it's things to think about. And if you do have any of these things, it may not be a bad idea to start, you know, think about talking to a counselor up front and see if you can start to, let's say, smooth things over. So maybe 3 to 6 months before you start thinking about going and trying to, you know, applying for rentals, you know, or applying for places to live, or putting in these applications, it may make sense to talk to a counselor and say, hey, I need to, you know, start making sure that, you know, I'm set up to look in the best light possible. So rental basics, you know, yeah, I guess it's, you know, you start with the neighborhood, the right place, you know, location. You know, you're going to pick out your furniture, you're going to pick out the size of the place you want, but, you know, also it's time to start thinking about security deposits and any other types of upfront costs. And again, if you give yourself a couple of months to kind of figure it out and see what you need, it's pretty helpful to determine how much money you're going to need up front, what utilities are you going to be paying for versus, and what do those look like? What do those costs look like? So if the landlord's paying for it, maybe you might be paying a little bit more on your lease, but it's like, hey, wait a second, these guys are covering my electricity, which is, you know, maybe $100 a month. I should factor that in when I think about that. So all this stuff all this stuff is typically going to be seen in your lease. One of the things that we've run across as a agency, one of the things that we've run across when we started to provide all the rental assistance programs is that a lot of people don't have a signed copy of their lease. They don't even have a copy of their lease. It's really, really important that if you're renting a place, that you not only have a copy of your lease, but you have a signed copy of your lease and you keep it handy. It's important for a lot of reasons. One, it's really kind of your rule book for between you and your landlord. It should discuss everything. So, for example, when everything from leaving, which is how your lease terminates. It's funny. My son just took out my son just moved out and he's moved into an apartment. And one of the things it says is that he has to give 60 days notice that he's going to be leaving, even though his lease ends. His lease runs for a year, but they're still telling him that he needs to give 60 days notice, or else his lease will automatically extend for another month. So it's check your lease, check the writing of the lease. And it's not necessarily that anybody's going to try and put anything in there that's tricky, but if you just know and understand what's in the lease, then it just puts you on good footing. And then you can kind of find ways to remind yourself that, oh yeah, okay, if this happens, I need to make sure that I have a way, I need to notify somebody or, find a way out of this. But at least it's not, you're not blindsided by it when you're trying to figure out what you can and can't do. As I said, most of the things that show up in the lease are, how do things get fixed? Who's responsible for fixing things? And it depends on what they are. If the toilet, if the toilet breaks, how does that fix? If the dishwasher breaks, if there's a leak, who do I notify and how quickly do I notify them? Does the landlord have to fix this stuff? Typically they're going to tell you they do, but you want to know this stuff up front. So it's one, ask the questions up front. Two, make sure it's in the lease. If you don't, and read the lease, don't just sign it. So, and then keep a copy of the lease. So very, very important. On the bottom here, it talks about parking, and I think that's fair. If you have you may or may not have, if you have a roommate, the roommate may have to be on the lease. If you have two cars, if you have a friend who's staying over and they're using a parking spot, that type of thing, or, is there parking? Is there assigned parking? How does that work? Can you rent your place out when you're not there? All sorts of stuff, right? So it's just, there's a lot of different questions that need to be answered or could be answered that may come up over the course of the year. And it's a good idea to get as much of that into the lease as possible. Typically, when you see a lease, it's kind of, the guys who write the leases have been around the block. So they say, oh yeah, they usually see a lot of this stuff coming. But if you have something specific that isn't addressed in the lease, make sure that it is addressed with your landlord before you start the move-in process. Always check for additional fees. I'll tell you, the lease that I looked at with my son was loaded with fees. It's just you just have to kind of check and make sure that when are they going to pop up and for what reason. So there's a fee for everything. Ideally, you just you got to make sure that you do what they ask and do what they tell you within the lease, and then you can avoid those. But they're typically set up so that your landlord can make more money. What's the difference between a rental agreement and a lease agreement? The rental agreement typically runs shorter term. And terms can change, with written notice, but it's fairly, it's usually like a 30 to 60 day type thing. Usually a lease adds, is more of a, 6 to 12 month type document. And again, as my sons did, I was just saying earlier, he can change that can change on a month. At the end of it, it goes to a month to month. So he has to actually, break the lease, or else it just automatically renews and just moves on for a month or two at a time. But the things to think about are their fees, acceptable payment methods. Sometimes you have to go through an app. Sometimes they want to check. Sometimes, it just depends. Everybody's different. Again, as we talked about, what utilities are included, how do repairs get fixed? Can you have a roommate? All good questions, all things that should be answered within the lease. So the lease is very, very important. Renter's insurance. Not many people know about renter's insurance, but I think it's really, really important. It protects your belongings in the event of fire, theft, or damage. It certainly provides coverage for any type of accident at your residence that you have at your rental. Keep in mind that even though your landlord has insurance, he's not insuring you, he's insuring his property, and he's insuring himself in the event that you get hurt on his property. But there's nobody really there to protect you, and that's what renter's insurance is for. The other thing is it does cover your belongings if you're traveling anywhere in the world, your belongings are covered, and it may cover additional living expenses in a situation where, for example, somebody drives through the front of your house and your house is unlivable for maybe 30 days or something like that. Renter's insurance will cover your temporary expenses while you're forced to move out and live somewhere else. They'll cover your expenses for you. So I'm going to show you a quick video here, which is, again,
if you're self-employed or a business owner, you need business insurance. And Next Insurance is fast and easy, and you can get covered.
We'll blow through the ad here, but I think this is a pretty good.
Home is where the heart is, and maybe all of your stuff too. But if you're among the 1/3 of all U.S. households that rent, your stuff may not be protected should you suffer a fire or theft. While the landlord or owner of the building you live in likely carries insurance, that insurance only provides coverage for the building itself, not your personal property inside that building. Where would you get coverage for your furnishings, clothing, and electronics? The answer is renter's insurance. A renter's policy offers protection for your personal property at your place of residence or anywhere in the world against covered losses. Examples of some covered losses include lightning, wind or hail, and the previously mentioned fire and theft. Renter's insurance, like a homeowner's policy, has two sections: property coverage and liability coverage. The main difference between the two policies is the property coverage section under a renter's policy does not cover the building you live in or other structures on the property, only your personal belongings inside that building. This section of the policy also includes coverage for small alterations or additions you may have made to your rental at your own expense. A renter's policy also provides loss of use coverage for any additional living expenses you incur when you have lost the use of your home. For example, should you have to vacate your apartment due to a fire in the building, this coverage would pay for the additional cost of a hotel or other temporary living expenses you would not normally have until the damage to your apartment can be repaired. The second part of a renter's policy provides liability and medical payments coverages. Liability coverage protects you and your guests for unintended damage to your rental or for an accident that occurs in your home. For example, if you were to leave the water running and flood your apartment and maybe the one below, your liability coverage would pay for the damages, up to the policy's limit, of course. And should the tenant of that apartment below you choose to sue you for their damages, this coverage could also defend you against a lawsuit and help pay for the expenses associated with that lawsuit. Medical payments coverage pays for medical bills incurred by guests injured on your property. It also covers injury you caused to someone else while you're away from home. So, should a guest in your home fall and injure themselves, or if you poke someone in the eye with your umbrella while getting on the bus, your renter's policy would cover their medical expenses, as well as any legal fees incurred because of the incident. This coverage does not, however, cover your own medical bills if you are injured. Your health insurance would take effect in this situation. Additional liability coverages under a renter's policy include claims expenses, first aid expenses, damage to property of others, and loss assessment. While renter's insurance is an important coverage for anyone who rents their home, it's a common misconception that if a renter is still in college, their parents' homeowner's policy will cover their belongings if the unthinkable happens. While there may be limited coverage for this personal property, the truth is anyone who rents their residence, including college students, should have a renter's policy to protect their possessions in the event of a loss. If a disaster strikes, the cost of all of your belongings can add up quickly. Fortunately, renter's insurance is extremely affordable. Talk to your independent insurance agent today to learn more about how to protect your belongings with a low-cost renter's insurance policy.
Okay, so
if you're trying to lose belly fat,
little too far there. There we go. So, so it's important to know, and I think it's, you know, renter's insurance, there's a couple of things. One thing that they mentioned about college, I would double check with my insurance agent or my insurance company. If you have some sort of homeowner's policy or renter's policy at your place and your son or daughter is going to live in a dorm, it might be different. I'm not 100% sure, but it might be different if they're living in a dorm rather than, you know, one of the things that they said, and I think you have to watch the language in it, of course, because it's an insurance company, but watch the language. And basically what they say is that if they're renters, and it looks to me like when you see that, it looks like they're renting an apartment, not necessarily renting, you know, but if you have a college student renting an apartment, then then they would need renter's insurance, but I'm not 100% sure if that would be the case. And I think every policy is kind of different on this, but it's worth checking into it and make sure that they may or may not be covered in a dorm. So something to think about. The other thing that they brought up that I think is really, really important is it's cheap. It's really, really cheap to get it. In fact, let's just jump right to this page. You can see that the average cost of renter's insurance by state, you know, in the state of Illinois, it's $171 per year, which means that comes up to about $14 a month. So I think it's probably pretty handleable for the most part, but I realize it's another $14, but at about $14 a month, I think it's pretty reasonable. The other dots in here that I think are really interesting is that it's not as widespread as you would think. You know, there are places here, and I think it's Maryland has 53%, but most states have less than 50% of their renters are insured. Illinois coming in at a whopping 35%. So something to think about. I think it's important to check it out. The people who provide renter's insurance are the same who provide, if you have homeowners or car insurance, it's personal or property and what is it, P&C. So personal insurance carriers, I would say the Allstates of the world, State Farm, Progressive, Geico, you know, those are the, you know, if you're watching a lot of football, those are the four that seem to pop up. Progressive. So those are the, you know, I guess those are the ones that I kind of lean towards, but there's obviously a lot of them out there, and anybody who you would find normal, I would say car insurance or homeowners insurance from, you'll find that they also have renters policies as well. So, and again, very affordable. We'll talk quickly about leases that can be terminated without, you know, continuing to pay rent for the entire lease term. If you are in a situation where your landlord breaches conditions stated in the lease, you have the ability to say, hey, you know, one of your remedies may be to terminate the lease. You know, if the property becomes uninhabitable, as I mentioned earlier, if something happens, let's say the person above you, you know, floods the place out and it drips into yours, or, you know, they get mold, you can terminate the lease. Ideally, you want to have renter's insurance in that situation, so your belongings are covered. And then if you or your spouse, this is an interesting one that I never realized, but if you or your spouse are relocated for military assignment, you can cancel the lease without paying rent for the entire lease term. So three things to that'll allow you to terminate a lease early if you so desire. Landlord's responsibilities once you've moved in. Safe and habitable housing is the number one responsibility that they need to provide. They should basically ensure that you have access to quiet enjoyment of your home and its surroundings, which means that, you know, at your responsibility, or the, as a tenant, my responsibility would be to make sure that my neighbors around me have, quiet enjoyment of their home and its surroundings. So if I'm making too much noise, they can get rid of me because I'm not allowing my neighbors to, so the landlord has the ability to kick me out, or to certainly bring me up to, have discussions with me. The other thing that landlords are responsible for is security deposits. And they just need to make sure that it's returned, that the security deposit is returned by the deadline, if and when you don't renew your lease. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to come back to you and say, there's a bill, that we have to, they're not going, they may come back and renegotiate your deposit, but at the end of the day, they have to at least present you with something when your lease is not renewed. So things to think about. The first steps when you start, where do you look for affordable housing? Do you need insurance? Yes, you do. I think you do. I would highly recommend it. What kind of rental is best for you? There's a lot of things that you can talk about. Again, if you wanted to talk to a counselor about that, or you wanted to start thinking about, okay, how do I get myself ready to put myself in a position to start looking for a place? Counselors are available to help you for that. Doesn't necessarily have to be us. It can be anybody in the I think in the nonprofit world, there's a lot of not-for-profit financial counselors out there. And I think they're all, worth checking into, certainly, to see, what you'll need and to see what they have to say. And they can probably help you out in a number of different ways. Is renting right for you? Yeah, I think at the end of the day, I think what it needs to, what it comes down to is, look at a budget. We talked about setting up the budget. The budget is kind of the epicenter for a lot of different things. In this case, create a realistic budget to determine, what your lifestyle is going to be like, where you're going to be living. Can you afford the utility expenses? Don't forget the food, personal bills, obviously, and any other expenses, and then give yourself a little bit of a fluff factor, if you will, to make sure that you can cover, again, ideally, what the landlords are looking for is that 30% number. So it's 30% of your gross income is the number that they're looking for. But when you run a budget, you're really looking at it as your net income, what money's coming in the door for you. So the major takeaways that I'm hoping that you'll walk away from with this conversation is, one, it's a big first step to move out on your own. And then, make sure that the signed lease is your owner's manual. So make sure you keep a copy of it, because it's really, really important. Renter's insurance, given the cost of it, and the cost benefit of it, it seems like it's a pretty good deal. Basically, for what I look at and what I see there, it certainly looks like it's a good deal for renters. And then finally, make sure that you budget for expenses, and make sure that it works on paper before you get into a position where you sign a lease for a year. So again, it's all part of the plan, and we talk about the rent here, showing just the whole picture. And what we talked about today is the rent in the corner here. So I always show this at the end. I show this one at the beginning, and then I show it at the end, just in case somebody says, hey, you know what, maybe I do want to call and talk to a counselor, or maybe I want to check out the website and see what you guys are all about. So I just show it again for that reason. Finally, a shout out to our funders, the people who pay, who provide grants to us so that we can provide these services. It's greatly appreciated. So, and I think that's the last page of my deck. And I do want to say that we've dropped a survey in the chat, and I would appreciate it if you guys if you guys could fill that out. That would be wonderful for me. It helps me to determine how we've done. So and it helps me if you can kind of give me an idea of what you think I can do differently to make it more, enjoyable, better, whatever. I'm always trying to make things better. So I'm trying to improve on these on these presentations. So there's also a place at the bottom, and it's an optional place where it just asks if you wanted to speak to a counselor. You have the ability to do so. You can leave your name and a way to contact you, and we'll give you a call. But you're not necessarily required to do that. Again, what I'm asking for is just simply to see if, I'm asking for feedback on how we can make our program better. So with that, if there's any questions, I can answer on them. If not, I don't know if we had anything. Okay, no. Thank you,
So we
Arlie.
do have a comment. Yeah, thank you. In the comments, I also added a link for information about housing discrimination in case you think you might be affected by it, just so you can be aware of it if you know of someone that might also benefit from that information. And if you do think that you might need legal advice in regards to housing discrimination, I also shared the link for Prairie State Legal Services, which provides free help for low income or people over 60, and they're all throughout Illinois. So they're a great resource to have if you have those concerns or just need legal help for these kinds of situations where you might need somewhere to stay. Lastly, I did share the link to the survey. Any comments, any feedback, it's welcome here. As far as additional content in the coming months, feel free to shoot us a comment, a message on social media, or send us an email straight to the library about other content you'd like to see here. Just see how we can support your financial learning. On that note, as we wait for any additional comments, I will take this moment for me to share my slide. We will be talking about individual taxpayer identification numbers on Thursday, February 3rd, same time, 6 p.m. here on Facebook or YouTube. But if you're looking for some movement, we will have 2 in-person programs for the Cha-Cha and line dancing here at the library. So we'll have the Cha-Cha January 27th, line dancing on February 24th. And then we have a couple lectures coming up as well. Trident College, a virtual field trip, so you can talk to an astronomer and kind of learn more about space. And we'll have a beginner's guide to plant-based nutrition. So all that information will be on our website or on our newsletter. But yeah, just making sure we're reaching out to you guys and providing the information you're looking for. We got another comment. Just thanking you, Tom, for sharing all this information tonight. But it looks like that might be it. Thank you for staying on so long and staying with us. And thank you, Tom, again, just always providing useful information.
Thanks, Gabby. I appreciate it. And thank you everybody for attending.
Okay. Have a great night.
Thanks.